Chapter 9. At just the instant that I wondered whether I broke the radio station, the janitors opened the door, but the only person to rush in was Mr. Sanders. He ran toward me. I thought he was going to shake my hand or hug me or ask for my business card, but he didn't do any of those things. What he did actually was lift me up out of his seat and put me down right next to Millicent. Then he sat where I was sitting and put the headphones back on his head. He started pushing buttons and pulling at levers. He didn't seem happy like I thought he'd be. I decided to wait and give him my resume later. Then Mrs. Pellington came rushing in saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." What was she apologizing for? There was a lot more yelling back and forth. Mr. Sanders was yelling about circuits to the engineers, and the engineers were yelling about kids today. And then Tuesday, the tour guide came rushing in with a very red face. She told us to hurry up and get out. We were all so confused. We had only been there for 45 minutes, and we were supposed to be there for 3 entire hours. Drew started to complain that he didn't get to see as much as I saw. Then everyone, except Elliot, Elizabeth, and Millicent, complained that they didn't get to see anything either. Mrs. Pellington was grabbing at her hands and looked more worried than I'd ever seen her. We didn't know why in the world we were leaving. Going down the elevator wasn't as exciting as coming up. Passing all the important people and going through the turnstiles and saying goodbye to security wasn't as much fun. Instead, everything felt bad, like I had done something really wrong. Did I just have another Cambridge magazine accident? No, it couldn't be that. I didn't spill anything on any originals. I didn't even see any originals to spill on. I was just trying to help Mr. Sanders. We all stood crowded on the street, but our school bus wasn't there. "We're not supposed to be finished for another 2 hours," said Mrs. Pellington, who sounded very worried. Then she started to dial her cell phone like crazy. All my classmates surrounded me to ask a bajillion questions about what it felt like to be on the radio. There was no way I could actually answer all of them. That's how many there were. I felt like a movie star. It was only when I realized their questions were getting hard to hear that I began to notice all the cars honking. The honking was really bad, and when I looked up, I saw the hugest traffic jam in the existence of the planet. Drivers were getting out of their cars and yelling at one another. Other drivers were hanging out of their windows, waving their fists in the air. I wondered if something very bad had happened. I really hoped not. Mrs. Pellington was talking to the people who worked in the lobby, and all they did was shrug at her. Even when she said in her very worried voice, "We're going to be stuck here forever." But we weren't stuck there forever. Even though it took a long time, a bus finally came to pick us up. There was so much traffic that we didn't move a centimeter for a really long time. In that really long time, Mrs. P said she was too angry to speak and that we would discuss this fiasco at our class meeting tomorrow. Chapter 10. The second I walked into our house, my parents had their "You're in big trouble, young lady" faces on. I don't know how they already knew about the radio station visit. I'd never seen my dad so burning mad before in all of my life. He had his arms crossed, and my mom had her hands on her hips. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there, holding my briefcase, waiting for something to happen. You promised us you'd be on your best behavior. I was. Taking over a radio show was your best behavior. It was an emergency. Mr. Sanders was in trouble. It was not an emergency, and Mr. Sanders was not in trouble. He was too in trouble. He left the studio. Mr. Sanders left the studio because he went to the bathroom. Huh? The bathroom? I hadn't even thought of that. I had a very big trouble feeling. You were not thinking, Francis. My mom Francised me. I was in even bigger trouble than I thought. We are extremely upset with you, my father said as he began to pace. You caused absolute mayhem, not just for the radio station, but for the entire town, my mother cried. Huh? The entire town? How in the whole wide world of America could that have been true? There are still traffic jams out there, my father said. I did not know what the traffic jams had to do with anything. Maybe my parents were so mad that they decided to blame everything bad that ever happened on me. Do you know how long it took me to get home? My mother said, with her voice raised. How long? I asked. But when she didn't answer, I realized that it was a trick question. The kind you're not supposed to answer out loud. Where on earth did you get the idea that the polling station moved? This was an easy one. Mrs. Pellington told us that the election was canceled in all the schools. My father stopped pacing and faced me. He and my mother looked at each other confused. This news made them a little less angry, which meant I was not grounded for forever, teen. Probably just forever. What did she say exactly? My father wanted to know. My father only asked for exactly things when he thought I didn't have the facts straight. But I did have the facts straight. She exactly said something about how there would be no more school voting ever in the world, that it would only be in local theaters, I said. Now they looked even more confused. So I added, or something like that. But our town doesn't have a local theater, my mom said. Oh, yeah, I said. I forgot that every time we wanted to see a play, we had to drive all the way to Morristown. Morristown wasn't local at all. So, if our town doesn't have a local theater, how could anyone in our town vote there? My dad asked me. Now I was stumpified. I don't know. I squinched my eyes closed together to try and remember exactly what Mrs. Pellington had been talking about. And just then, I felt some little memories start to drizzle in. A big ocean wave swelled inside my belly and up to my head as I sort of, kind of, maybe, possibly, perhaps, remembered a tiny detail that must have fallen into one of my brain creases. Which meant there was a chance that I sort of, kind of, maybe, possibly, perhaps, wasn't paying the most carefulest attention to Mrs. Pellington. I was, however is a very grown-up word, paying the carefulest attention to note passing with Elliot. And that's when I had the big realization and looked up at my parents with the guilt of the world in my eyes. When Elliot and I started to pay attention, I thought Mrs. Pellington was talking about voting being moved from our school to the local theater. But she wasn't. She was probably still telling us the story she had started about her childhood. But because I wasn't paying attention so well, I thought that by the time I started to pay attention, she must have started a new story. I was in a worldwide canyon of trouble. Do you know what kind of trouble you created for everyone? See what I mean? I shook my head no. That was the truth of the world. I really didn't know. Now my father started pacing again. Well, first of all, you gave out wrong information. The voting was at Chester Elementary. That's why you were on a field trip all morning. To get you out of the way for the early morning voting rush. Second of all, you had no business sitting at Mr. Sanders' desk. Third of all, you had no right to answer a phone that wasn't ringing in your own home. There was a huge traffic jam today because all the Chester people and all the Morristown people were headed toward the Morristown polling place. By the time the Chester people finally figured out that they were supposed to vote at your school, they almost missed their chance to vote in the proper district. You might have cost Mr. Malloy the opportunity to be mayor, and he's the one you like. Oh, was all I could manage to say. The traffic jam was my fault? I felt terrible. I hadn't meant to do anything wrong at all. In fact, I meant to do the exact opposite of wrong. I was just trying to be an adult. Do you know what you're doing when you pass on information before getting the facts straight? My mom asked. I shook my head no. Again. You're starting rumors, she answered. Oh, that's a pretty kiddish thing to do, huh? Finally, a yes I could shake my head to. Then my dad had a very good idea. Let's go make dinner and we'll discuss this some more later. I followed them into the kitchen where they turned on the news, and guess what the top story of the day was? Mrs. Frankie B. Miller nearly ruins it for the community. It felt terrible. I had a very heavy weight on my shoulders. That was definitely not the way I imagined hearing about myself on the radio.